The Soviets invaded Afghanistan on the 24th of December 1979. They only left on the 15th of February 1989. The Soviets had a massive advantage in manpower and equipment. Fighting against the Mujahideen, their main opponent, was not easy for them. The Mujahideen had no central leadership, so they could not be negotiated with. They refused to fight in any big battles and only fought using guerrilla tactics in areas that they knew they had a definite advantage, like hills or forests or mountains. They also liked hit and run tactics. Soviet jets were ineffective because whenever the Mujahideen saw a large group of birds flying away, they realized that Soviet jets were coming and hid. The Soviets did have one weapon that worked against the Mujahideen: the Hind helicopter gunship. It was very effective and could sweep down and wipe out anything in its path. Until the US gave the Mujahideen surface-to-air Stinger missiles. The Hind stood no chance against the Stingers and were destroyed. The Soviets could not identify the Mujahideen because they looked just like the normal Afghanis. So, they started a massacre and mass exodus with orders from Mikhail Gorbachev, the later famous Pizza Hut man. Villages were attacked, cattle was gunned down, and landmines were strewn all over farmland. In just a year, this killed over 1 million Afghanis. They were trying to force the rural population into urban areas that they controlled. Enough fled to Kabul to triple the population, but most fled to Iran and Pakistan. 3.2 million Afghanis fled to Pakistan. Extremist Pakistani militias, each more extreme than the last, went to fight in Afghanistan. The Soviets finally left on the 15th of February 1989, nearly 10 years later. But the damage had been done. There were still millions of landmines everywhere. That are still there today and are still killing people. The Soviet-backed communist government was defeated in 1992. The Mujahideen groups entered Kabul in total victory, and then they turned to fighting each other. Civil war broke out over Afghanistan, and the country was still engulfed in war. The children in the refugee camps in Pakistan weren't in the best conditions. The only way out was the Pakistani madras. These were a religious form of mosque, like a church or a synagogue. They provided free education and were run by clerics who got their orders from the political parties of Pakistan. There were 2,000 madrasas by the Afghani border. 220,000 children entered these schools. They were then subsequently brainwashed by the Pakistani government, who wanted them to believe only what the Pakistani government wanted them to. They were also taught how to be skillful in combat. These were the Taliban. The word Taliban in Arabic means students, with the singular word being talib, or student. A group of Taliban took some of the Kandahar province from the Mujahideen. The people welcomed the changing government. They appeared to be less cruel than the Mujahideen, and they punished thieves and murderers more violently, which put off murderers and thieves. They didn't realize the Taliban were murderers and thieves. The Pakistani inter-service intelligence had been very heavily involved in the Taliban, and now they gave them arms, training, and support. In 1994, the Taliban had neutralized the Mujahideen checkpoint at the border to allow trade with the people of Afghanistan. They finished the conquest of Kandahar. They were able to loot heavy military vehicles from the Mujahideen, weapons and money. In 1995, they controlled a major part of Afghanistan and were advancing on the capital of Afghanistan, Kabul. After they had taken Kabul and most of Afghanistan, the people realized how truly terrible the Taliban were. Women were discriminated against. Music and movies were banned. People were beaten, killed, or punished in some awful ways for the least crime. This time, Pakistan has lost its influence over the Taliban. They now have to obey the Taliban and do whatever they said for fear of Taliban retaliation. They also did their best to send the rest of the Taliban into Afghanistan. The Taliban were now in control.